Welcome to Choose Views with Richard Chew. Get ready to dive into a world of insightful conversations and thought-provoking discussions.
As progressives, our job is to have an all-inclusive, full-on assault with all of our players.
A show that focuses on moving our political, social, economic, gender, and cultural conversation forward.
And all of our players means all of our players.
It's Choose Views. And now, here's your host, Richard Chew.
Good Thursday morning, political fighters, and welcome to the July 9th, 2026 edition of Choose Views, 773-763-9278. Find my show on Facebook Live, TuneIn Radio, YouTube, and of course, you can email me at richard@wcpt820.com. Follow me on all the socials under Choose Views. That's where I hang out. And catch all of our shows by subscribing to our WCPT podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, and iHeartRadio. There you can get Choose Views featured interviews. Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive, Driving It Home with Patty Vasquez. It's The Democracy Stupid with Edwin Eisendrath, Out Chicago, and our other great shows and interviews here on the station. Also, in the evenings, make sure you are checking out the Politics Bar, the Matt McNeil Show, and the Gailey Show, because that's our evening just brilliance. Making your way over to heartlandsignal.com is always going to provide you with tools that you can use, information that you can share with your folks and the people that you are trying to bend their ear to get them to think like you. No, not think like you, but to think and maybe get unstuck. One of the good ones that's there, Daniel Squadron is the president and co-founder of Future Now and author of The Fourth Branch, which is an interview that we played last Friday. I had a chance to talk with Daniel about the future of American politics is founded in the states. And this week we've had a couple of great interviews with folks that are running for state offices and their beliefs about what the state Senate or House races will do for the state that they're in, Michigan, Arkansas, and others. So check out the article, the conversation that I had with Daniel Squadron over at heartlandsignal.com. And you can make sure you share that with folks who are trying to figure out what to do in their state. What are some of the strengths? And then maybe get a copy of the book, The Fourth Branch, as well. So there you go. Thanks to Maddie B for getting us off to the start, and Mike Mercado for making sure that we are staying on the rails and that we look reasonably decent. On today's show, in the 6:30 hour, Mike Nellis, Democratic strategist, will be with us, and host of Endless Urgency with Mike Nellis. Stephen Phillips is a columnist with the New York Times and author of Brown is the New White, and as well as a couple other great books. One of them, the title is a great title, and that is, our white guy's really smarter than all the rest of us. So that'll be a cool conversation. We've had Steve with us before. And another guest that's been with us before that is changing lives every single day, guys. That's Kate Lincoln-Goldfinch, who is an immigration attorney down in Austin, Texas. That when I say changing lives, that is not an overstatement. She has definitely been one to do that and to affect folks dealing with immigration issues, not just in Texas, but throughout the country. So looking forward to having Kate back on the show this morning. So there you go. That's what's happening. Got some commentary that'll come your way after the first break about where we are currently and how I would like to see what Democrats are going to be doing and what my encouraging ideas represent. But, some of the latest news leads to the question of the day that I have, and we'll talk about this more. Graham Plattner suspends his campaign. You guys have heard that probably by now. If you haven't, you heard it here. But I wanted to ask the question of the day and frame it this way. Do you guys think that the main Senate race is done for Democrats? Or is there still a chance? And who is the candidate going to be, or who would you like the candidate to be? Now, folks are all over the country that listen to our show one way or the other. So I know that you don't have a vote necessarily, but I am curious about how you think and what you see in this space, and primarily because, it's my dotted line theory. All that we do here in Illinois or in California or in Texas or wherever, we now have to all pick up a shovel and say we are part of this process. We're part of the solution, I believe. That's the thing that as I talk about this race in Maine, and we'll talk so much about the race in Maine, but like I said, the question, do you guys think that the Maine Senate race for Democrats is done for Democrats, or is there still a chance to win this seat and beat Susan Collins? And who do you think will be the candidate? It's up to the Maine voters and to the people that decide there. But I want to hear what you guys have to say about it and the larger picture about this overall conversation about us taking back the U.S. Senate. So the dotted line, Richard's dotted line theory, I think that's where we are in our politics today. You heard me say versions of this before. We live in a dotted line climate, or some might say kind of the butterfly effect. What's happening in one state or one city does impact us in one way or another. Our travel to that area, family that we may have there, or friends. So I think one of our superpowers, I think we have more than just one, as a progressive liberal Democratic Party, is that we have to be concerned about, aware of at the very least, of what's happening in other markets, other communities, other states, because our impact can be felt there because of how we've kind of become global with our politics. And I don't mean global in terms of the entire globe, but global in terms of the United States. So I want us to be concerned about what goes on in other states and other communities. I want us to know what's happening. And gosh, with all the technology, Matty B, that we have, I mean, you can become a junior expert on what's happening in politics and social issues and economic issues 1,000 miles away. That empowers us. That makes us stronger. That makes us better as a party. And it also pushes back on what the GOP is trying to do from the top down, which is separate us and divide us and push us away from each other. And I'll be doggone if I'm going to allow that to happen. As the phrase goes, not on my watch, like I have a watch, but I just think that that's one of our huge opportunities, is to let the folks in Maine know we got you. It's a struggle now more than we wanted it to be, but we got you. And I think that the more we do that as a community, the more we are focused in on that, and this is a phrase that I use a lot, the more we give ourselves permission that it's okay to get involved in politics across the country, the better we are as a party. We don't have to, bury our heads mad and say, well, that's going on over there. That's really not going to affect me. No, it does affect you. Think about it like this. If you don't think that the Senate race in Maine or the one in Texas impacts you in terms of Tallarico, we win back the Senate, we get to change a whole bunch of stuff. We don't just have to sit stalled on certain things. That's why. I mean, think about it like this. The ugly bill, we have the House and the Senate, we get to change some stuff. We get to pull in we get to change some stuff on a big ugly bill. We get to change some stuff with ICE. So that's why a race that's in a different state across the country from where you are is important. Because when we take back those levers of power, we get to do stuff or prevent certain things from being done so that we are a little bit stronger throughout the entire country. So there you go. Let me know what your thoughts are. You can send me a text, or you can email me, or you can call. Give us a shout. We'll try to get you on, or squeeze in your thoughts, and then make your way to our Facebook page and leave your comments there. So there you go. Let's take a quick break, guys. I might grab a couple of texts when we get back. Give us a holler. The number is 773-763-9278. You are listening to Choose Views on WCPT AM 820 in Chicago and 103.5 FM from Warren County in North Carolina. And now, AM 950, the progressive voice of Minnesota. I'm Richard Chu, and we'll be right back. All right, guys, welcome back to Choose Views. If you're just tuning in, I'm Richard Chu. Welcome to the show, and we'll bring you a couple of quick Choose Views news items. Then we're going to talk a little bit about the Democratic Party. On this July 9th, 2026, Delta Airlines announces no-frills basic business fares. They're launching this as their new report from CNBC says Delta Airlines is launching the basic fares for business and first class cabins. That's what it's called. Customers who opt for the no-frills basic tickets will receive the same lie flat seats and in-flight amenities, minus perks like lounge access and advanced seat selection. The move comes after rival United Airlines launched a similar streamlined option earlier this year for its Polaris business class and other premium cabins. Carriers are increasingly focused on catering to the high-spending customers who are continuing to travel despite economic pressures. Apple is committing to buy $30 billion of U.S.-made Broadcom chips. I think this is a good move. Apple announced yesterday that it will spend more than $30 billion over the next 5 years with long-term partner Broadcom to purchase U.S.-made chips and wireless components. The deal, Apple's largest to date, as part of the $600 billion U.S. investment plan, will fund a $1.5 billion expansion of Broadcom's Fort Collins, Colorado production facility. Affordable Care Act premiums unfortunately surged for the second year in a row. The Affordable Care Act plans will see premiums surge by double digits in 2027, according to the Wall Street Journal. Premiums are set to increase by a median of 14% in more than 1 states, according to the health policy group KFF, which analyzed the ACA rates and its filings. It's the second consecutive year that insurers are raising prices, citing climbing healthcare costs and declining enrollment. That's what happens when you get rid of subsidies. And last but not, well, we have two more, sorry. The Fed's history suggests more than one rate hike ahead. The Federal Reserve is expected to hike interest rates once this year and then again based on inflation. But CNBC notes that historical patterns show a preference for multiple adjustments, with inflation consistently above the central bank's 2% target. Policymakers face growing pressures to act. The upcoming minutes from the Fed's June meeting may offer some clarity on policy directions. Meanwhile, futures traders are betting on a September rate increase, with rates higher than expected. With rates remaining unchanged for the next year. And last but not least, the markets roiled as Trump says the Iran truce is over. The oil prices surged back over pre-war levels, and markets fell yesterday after the renewed hostilities between the United States and Iran and the attempt to wave off the fragile ceasefire. I think it's over, according to Trump, as he told reporters at the NATO summit in Turkey. Brent crude climbed 8% to $80 a barrel, and most global indexes dropped following reports of attacks on the commercial ships traversing the Straits of Hormuz. So there you go, guys. A couple of quick Choose Views news items this Thursday, July 9th, 2026. Got a fool in the White House. Got a fool in the White House. And I talked about this earlier in the week, the amount of money that he's made on his crypto thing and the number of people that have lost money at the same time. There's folks that would be probably in jail over that, but there you go. So let me get to a couple. Let me see. We got a couple calls. We'll go to that in a second. Let's see what a couple of you guys have said this morning regarding Maine and my question. Maine, this is coming from 773. Maine is a blue vote no matter who situation. The goal is to get rid of a Republican. If the goal is to get rid of a Republican, the vote has to be for a Democrat. You know, I don't disagree with you there. At this point, that's got to be the strategy, and hopefully the Maine voters can see it that way, that at the end of the day, what Graham Plattner has done or been accused of doing is shameful, it's embarrassing, it's heartbreaking, and all kinds of comments, and obviously there are direct people that were impacted, people that were directly impacted by it. So we get to have a distance of opinion about it. But ultimately, Susan Collins and her votes and her support of Donald Trump have been more harmful to more people throughout the entire country. That's why this seat is so important. And I heard that one of the women that came forward, I think in the Politico interview, Matt, said, I believe in Plattner's politics and what he stands for politically and his potential plans. But she needed to share her story, which we have to respect and support. So that says, to go back to what this listener just texted me to say, Maine is a blue vote no matter whose situation. So we get to pick, Wayne gets to pick who that candidate is. And let's hope that that candidate is blue and strong enough, and enough voters say, you know what, Susan Collins has caused more harm to more people throughout the state. She's voted against some things that would support women's rights. Okay, so let's also draw down on that a little bit. She's done things to affect people in far greater ways, in more factions than we know of Graham Plattner and his misdeeds. So as much as we have to hold some responsibility for putting him up as a candidate without enough vetting, we also know that Susan Collins is daily vetting herself as a sitting senator in that state, and how many people her votes or her concerned, commentary has impacted the entire country. So I agree with what the listener says here. Let's grab another. Do we want to get that one? Okay, let's go to the quick call we've got from. It's Professor Andre. We got to get this call. Good morning, Andre, and welcome to the show.
Thank you, and good morning from one professor to the new professor, Mr. Chu. Thank you so much there. Hey, I was listening to what you were saying, Mr. Chu, about when the Democrats take over Congress. But there's some reforms I'm interested in. We got a lot of corruption in our politics here in our democracy because we are too loose with the truth and loose with holding people accountable. So one of the reforms I like to see when it comes to confirming the Supreme Court justice, I like to see a 2/3 vote rather than a simple majority. As it stands now, to confirm a Supreme Court justice, you just need 51 votes. I mean, if there's a tie, then the vice or whoever it is can break the tie and get whoever they want. That's one reform I like to see. And then you probably recall a guy by the name of Bob Woodward. Mm-hmm. Well, Bob Woodward sat on all that information about what Donald Trump said about COVID-19, and he put it in a book. I'd like to see a reform that if you are a politician working in the capacity of a Todd Blanche or some of these other politicians, that you should not be allowed to write a book pertaining to your position, because they are paid servants of us. We pay their salary, and if we let them write books, that means they can hold pertinent information to help our society, and then turn around and put it in a book and try and sell us the information that they should have been giving us free to begin with. So those are some reforms that I'd like to see. If you're a Todd Blanche and you've been to court and you had to testify, why should you be allowed to write any book on your career there? That means you held out something out to put in the book. Those are reforms I like to see, Mr. Chu.
Well, yeah, right out of the gate, the corruption piece and the Supreme Court. Yes, agreed. I can only add to what you just said, Andre. Yes, I agree. I think that a person that served in the federal government to do something like that takes advantage of the belief that people want to have in our system. And if that's not there, then I think indirectly it becomes a way for people to feel a certain amount of suppression about participating in the political process when they see that people are doing that kind of thing. Or taking advantage of their access to information and their privilege in that space. So standards should be a little bit higher for those that have been elected to an office, or those that have been appointed by someone or groups that have been elected to offices. So you get no pushback from me there. So
that applies to both, Mr. Chu. I wouldn't want to see the Democrats or Republicans be able to write books, because Democrats should be more beholden to me or us as Democrats just as well. So I don't want to see Jamie Raskin putting stuff in a book that he should have been out there telling us to begin with. I don't want to see Democrat or Republican, whoever you are, independent. I just don't want to see it. And last thing, Mr. Chu, I said the reform I like to see on the Supreme Court, instead of a simple majority, it requires a 2/3 vote. But someone like Bernie Sanders and what he did, you would think with Bernie Sanders and his experience that he would have vetted Graham Plattner far more than he did. Now, Bernie Sanders already had a strike against him for sympathizing with Fidel Castro. He took a lot of heat for that, and that might have led to him not winning. But now it makes him look even worse for Democratic Socialists to be supporting Graham Plattner. And look what happened. It got through back in his face.
Well, he did not recant. He did draw down his endorsement, as a number of people have. And I think I said this either yesterday or the day before that, this is part of this is, if we're going to be the party we say we are, then we have to take a certain amount of responsibility. We have our own cleanup on aisle 7. This is one where, however it was missed, we have a certain amount of responsibility to that. All of us do. Some of us I'm going to speak about myself for a second. I said last fall, I've said it a few times the last week or so, I said it back in May that where there's smoke, there's fire. Something wasn't quite right. And I go back to what some people aren't, I don't hear a lot of people in corporate media talking about this, and a lot of people saying these words. Everybody's talking about just a tattoo and the text messages and now these allegations. I took it personally when it was brought out that he said, "Why don't black people tip?" I thought it was too specific of a thing to say about an entire community. I tip really well when I go out, Andre, because I understand the folks that are out there working their tails off. And everybody that I know that's African-American, they tip really well. So when I heard that, I thought, that's really kind of an odd thing for somebody to say. And yeah, there's only 3% of the population of Maine is black based on the numbers that I have. But it shouldn't be something that you just say willy-nilly. And so we have all a responsibility. Some of us spoke a little bit louder, a little bit earlier on. Bernie's one of those that got behind him. And, Bernie's not always right. Bernie was wrong about Tulsi Gabbard. He was wrong about Fetterman. So, this is where I say we have to all have our hands on the table if we plan on moving it effectively. So there you go.
And in addition to what you said, Mr. Chu, I think we owe it to ourselves to do our own research when it comes to that too. Because now the way it looks, okay, we have to be skeptical about when Bernie Sanders endorses a candidate now, or for anybody for that matter. We have to take and read about them and do our own research, and not just take for somebody on stage holding somebody's hand up and say, "This is my guy. This is my candidate."
Yep.
We can't do that. We have to do the research. So thank you, Mr. Chu, for giving me the time to express this morning. I truly appreciate it. Belated happy 4th of July to you and your family. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, Andre. You be well as well. Also, thank you for your contribution.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye. Andre's just, what do you say? Right, Mike? Right, Matty B? He pays attention. He listens. He forms some great thoughts. And thank you for that. And thanks to all of our listeners who fit into that category. We got to take a quick break, though. 773-763-9278 is the number. You're listening to Choose Views on WCPT, AM 820 in Chicago, AM 1520 and 103.5 FM from Warren County, North Carolina, and our good friends at AM 950, the progressive voice of Minnesota. I'm Richard Chu. When we come back, we might be talking with Mike Nellis. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Choose Views. I'm Richard Chu, if you're just tuning in. Thanks to Andre. I got to call him Professor because he's always bringing us the knowledge and teaching us something for his comments this morning. You guys have seen and heard this gentleman, our first guest this morning on our show and on so many other great broadcasts. He is the host of Endless Urgency and one of the top voices in Democratic strategy right now. I'll just say political strategy broadly. Mike Nellis, good morning. Welcome back to Choose Views.
Morning, buddy. How you doing?
Doing great. I'm actually doing great this morning. I hope you're doing well. As I know your travel this week has been. You've been. I thought about you the other day. I was like, I feel like Mike is that dude that's sitting in the airport with just sitting there looking around like, okay, what do I do next? How am I going to get to my next destination?
100%. I never stop. Like I don't have that in me.
All right. I'm glad you're with us and you're safe and you're good. We haven't talked in a few weeks because of your travel, my travel, and all the rest. But welcome back to the show. I literally, I was thinking yesterday, what do I want to talk to Mike about? And of course, we all know what the current events are, the elephants in the room, and there's more than one right now. But obviously, the most recent thing that hit us is the situation with Plattner, and as of late, he has decided to step out of the race. I just said this in the previous segment before you came on. Last fall, May, I said something's not making sense here, and here we are. So we can beat ourselves to death about what we maybe didn't do well enough in the vetting process and all the rest. But I think now the question is, and my question of the day for the audience is, do you guys think that Maine, the Senate race is done for Democrats? And if not, or, what are our chances of winning and who may be the candidate? So I want to get your take on that right out of the gate.
Well, I think we can still win Maine. And obviously everything about this situation is incredibly unfortunate. And I feel particularly bad for the multiple women who have had to come forward to tell their truth about this guy, including, by the way, a friend of mine, Emily, who wrote a piece yesterday for Newsweek. And it didn't get a lot of attention, but I thought it was really powerful the way she talked about how we like to talk about how we believe women, but when it's inconvenient to believe women, we don't. And it isn't useful unless we believe them when it costs us something. And in this particular instance, this costs us something in the sense that it disrupts a very important Senate race. It's very embarrassing for the party. But I think we're handling it. Saying we're handling it the right way would be incorrect, but we're handling it, period. And Republicans don't handle their side of it. So I do think we can win the Maine Senate race here, and I think it's going to be a question of what candidate the Maine Democrats put forward. They've announced overnight that they're going to do a nominating convention with like 600 voting delegates. I don't particularly care for that process. I'd prefer that they do a shotgun caucus across the state and give people a chance to show up and make their voice heard.
Yep.
Because I'm worried that the process will feel tainted to people. I think they need to move someone forward who can capture that progressive energy that Plattner was able to create. I think if they try to install an establishment or a moderate candidate here, that would be a tremendous mistake, because all those volunteers and all those people who were really excited about what Plattner had to say on the economy and every other political issue, they need to be honored for winning the primary like they do. Plattner shouldn't get to decide who it is, but I think somebody like Troy Jackson is probably, my instinct here is that Troy is everything that Graham Plattner claimed to be, right? Like a real working class guy, very progressive, has been in the state forever doing the work, and a decent human being. He's a logger. He's a really good dude. I've known him for a while. I tend to go that way, but, we'll see how it plays out, and that's going to be the operative question for whether or not Democrats could win.
Yeah, and, this is that moment. And thank you for that, Mike. This is one of those moments where I think the Democrats in Maine, and we'll just stick with that for a second, have the opportunity to say we've been wronged for a longer period of time with Susan Collins than we were, or women specifically were, with Plattner's history. I think that needs to be a part of the conversation. And I often use a phrase, and you do too, walking and chewing gum. This is that moment where we have to walk and chew gum. One of those pieces is we have to make sure that we get the person that's going to be, and I say we because I believe this is all something all of us have to have a certain amount of interest and responsibility in. We can get to that in a second. But if we don't start pinning stuff on Susan Collins for her history of voting and being in alignment with whomever the Republican president was, and most recently Donald Trump times two, we missed the opportunity to talk about how she's dragged women as well. In some ways, some might say even worse, because of the way in which she stood by and let certain opportunities for women and care for women, obviously with Dobbs, and so many other things just go by the wayside. I think that's got to be part of the messaging. Like we got to start tagging her with these things, because she stood idly by and concerned as hell, but not doing a damn thing.
Yeah, well, I think if you're mad that Roe v. Wade got overturned and that women in this country have fewer rights today than they did a decade ago, Susan Collins has to make the list of people who are responsible for that, because she saved Brett Kavanaugh's nomination to the Supreme Court.
Yep.
And she was warned.
Yes, sorry. Yeah, go ahead, man. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. You're good. It's your show.
When she did that, everybody thought that she knew what she was doing and what she was talking about, and she was so far wrong. Didn't listen to women. Then this is a great juxtaposition, I think. Talk about that.
Well, look, if you ask conservative activists about Susan Collins, and there was actually a local Maine radio host who said this a few weeks ago, he was like, oh, yeah, Susan Collins is a moderate, but I love her because she's there when we need us, when we need her. And
Wow.
That is the most revealing comment that they could possibly make there, is like, when they need her, she will vote for that. So everything that she's doing is an act right now. And on, just on the Plattner stuff for just one more second, and I'm done talking about this guy. I want him to fade into history and be a trivia question 30 years from now because he's just not a good dude. But, nobody has the moral high ground on any of this stuff. And there have been people who've turned the other way in the Democratic Party. Well, a lot of people have turned the other way in the Republican Party. Like, I just have zero interest in being lectured by them. There's no moral high ground to be had here. What I will say is, like, Susan Collins's votes and the way that she's conducted herself in the 30 plus years that she's been in the United States Senate. I just think it's worth noting. I was 8 years old when Susan Collins was elected to the United States Senate, and I'm nearly 40 now. And she has damaged the state of Maine. Ask the average Mainer, are you better off than you were in 1996? The average answer is probably going to be no, because economically we are struggling, and it is because Susan Collins hasn't done anything to help people in Maine. Okay, like her legislative accomplishments are nothing. She votes for the Republican Party like a rubber stamp when they need her. Women have been ravaged by this version of the Republican Party and had their rights taken away from them, and she's just talking about how concerned she is all the time. And I think we need to get back to that. And I think, like, Democrats have to clean up our house here, get a candidate out there that can still capture that energy that was there for Plattner, but be prepared to go out there and make our case, because people are ready for change. Like, the economy's really bad right now. So I think the people writing off Maine for the Democrats are being really short-sighted here, because we can still win this race.
Plattner is not the reason we're, per se, that Maine's got its issues. The issues are there because Susan Collins has not done her job, where she has done her job, which is to line up with the Republicans. But the Kavanaugh thing, when we talk about, I mean, this is one of those, you and I are both going to dive into the weeds here. Brett Kavanaugh was accused, think about this, y'all. Brett Kavanaugh was accused of equally the same thing that Graham Plattner was. And many people could measure and say Brett Kavanaugh's role in our U.S. government is more important than Plattner's is. If we wanted to play that out.
It would, it would be. Yeah.
Okay. And so if we were to say that, and we didn't believe Ms. Blasey Ford, and then Susan Collins was one of those people that created a bridge for him to become a U.S. Supreme Court justice, that's where we have to start focusing our message. Susan Collins is the bad guy here in this conversation. Plattner's not the good guy, but ultimately, as it relates to these issues, I think that we've got to really, really keep hitting her. And I'm hoping that the main machine politically, and to the extent that the DNC can be involved in this, we've got to keep tagging her, because she's the real culprit here at the end of the day. That 30 years of getting nothing done, but being the rubber stamp, like you said, Mike, is just not good enough anymore. I mean, hell, in terms of helping Maine become a state that's been viable and a great state and all that, Janet Mills is a superstar. Yeah, she's 70 years old, and some people may not have been the appeal of her and age and all the rest may not have been there, but doggone it, she's been a far better champion for the folks in Maine than Susan Collins could have been on her best days.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. And I love Janet Mills. She can't be the nominee here, obviously, but just given the fact that she lost the primary, I just think the revolt on that from the progressive left would be extraordinary. It'd be honestly worth watching. I just don't want it to happen. It's like what? It's like watching a car crash. I wish it wasn't happening, but I can't turn away.
Can't turn away. I agree with you. I mean, I love her work and what she's gotten done. And I was behind her when she decided to step aside. I said, okay, I'm roll with the program. But at this point, to your earlier part of the question, and that is, who should it be? Who could it be?
Yeah.
Whoever it is, we still have to tag Susan Collins, because she's the one that's gotten us to this point with so many other issues from a voting standpoint and SCOTUS and all the rest. So
it's true. And you brought up Dr. Ford's testimony against Brett Kavanaugh. And this is, I just think, is an important point, is that she flew across the country, by the way, had a painful fear of flying, in order to testify in front of the entire country under oath, disrupted her entire life physically and financially, faced death threats to stand up to one of the most powerful members of the Republican Party, because now he's a Supreme Court justice, in Brett Kavanaugh. And she, in vivid detail, walked everybody through the accusation against Brett Kavanaugh, had other corroborating evidence to back it up. And Susan Collins still voted to save Brett Kavanaugh's nomination. She could have killed it There is a sexual predator. Unfortunately, there's more than one sexual predator on the Supreme Court because Thomas is still there. But she saved that. And she saved it because of raw political power. They wanted to tilt the balance of the Supreme Court. They wanted to replace Ruth Bader Ginsburg with Brett Kavanaugh. They wanted to be able to make it harder. Excuse me, that's not the same opening. I apologize. But they wanted to be able to put another person on there who would overturn Roe v. Wade, and that's exactly what happened. And Susan Collins is responsible for that, and that matters here too.
Yes, it does, and we have to keep tagging her over and over and over again with that. I think that's part of the messaging. I think it's a good juxtaposition of who's really harming the women of Maine. Just me, but I'm from Chicago, so sometimes I think that way. Mike, let's take a quick little break. The number is 773-763-9278. You're listening to Choose Views on WCPT AM 820 in Chicago and WARR 1520 AM and 103.5 FM from Warren County, North Carolina, and our good friends at AM 950, the progressive voice of Minnesota. I'm Richard Chu, talking with my good friend Mike Nellis, Democratic strategist and host of Endless Urgency with Mike Nellis. We'll be right back. All right, guys, welcome back to Choose Views. If you are just tuning in, I'm Richard Chu, talking with Democratic strategist Mike Nellis, host of Endless Urgency with Mike Nellis. So before the break, obviously, we were laying the sledgehammer to what we think should happen with Susan Collins politically because of all the harm she's caused over decades. And I'm hoping that that's part of the messaging, is let's just keep tagging her. But Mike, I got to ask you a question. Are you a communist? I mean, Donald Trump said that you and me, that we're communists, dude. I mean, help us out with that. You and Adam Mockler had a great conversation around that.
I mean, I guess if you believe that people shouldn't go bankrupt when they get sick, you're a communist. So, sure, why not? What does it matter anymore, Richard? I mean, like, this is what I talked to Mockler about, is like, and I said, I shouted this at Leland Vittert last week on News Nation, and I love my buddy Leland, but like, Sarah Palin called Barack Obama a radical Muslim jihadist communist in 2008. And they think they've invented some new bold talking point that's going to win them the midterms. They're going to be able to turn it all around. People are going to stop caring about $4 for gasoline and this stupid war and how expensive everything is and how the job market sucks, because they're going to call Zohran Mamdani a communist. Like, it is the laziest, lamest form of Republican politics. It doesn't work. And it's just stupid. And I don't care. Like, if you want to call me a communist, go ahead. I'm trying to solve some problems here. And I'm sorry, but like, I think the New Deal was pretty great. And I think the Great Society was pretty great. And I'm going to defend having a strong social safety net that lifts people up and lifts people out of poverty, because we have way too many people that can't afford their bills right now. And I care more about that than I do about stupid labels.
Yeah, I've been labeled a lot in my life, for obvious reasons.
Oh, I would imagine, buddy.
You don't even have to imagine. You've been around enough folks like me that you know exactly what I'm talking
100%.
about.
100%. I used to, listen, I tell people sometimes, it's like, I'm a white boy from Nebraska, but I used to run the social media for Kamala Harris. And like, I saw some things that were said at her. It's like crazy.
And you probably had some moments where you even went, damn.
There were multiple times where I had to go, I don't even know what that means. I had to Google it. I was like, because I couldn't imagine the level of hate that came at her. And by the way, little did any of them know they were just tweeting at a white boy from Nebraska. Like, it's ridiculous.
Well, but that's why your point is well taken about, the label. We don't take on the label. Somebody can call us what they want to call us, but we know who we are. And not to your point about trying to fix things is really more important. It does seem like there's a waffling that's going on with Republicans in terms of their strategy. And someone said to me over the weekend that the concern is that they're just going to, quote unquote, show their backside as much as they can about Democrats name calling. And this is kind of what Trump did with this communist thing, that it's just going to be about name calling. It's not going to be about anything that's policy related or anything that's substantive. That as we get through, and I said this in part the other day, Mike, after we get through Labor Day, all bets are off. Republicans are just going to come with all the nastiness and all the garbage. It'll be a name-calling fest. It won't be a conversation around policy and about ideas and about how to actually move the country forward.
No. Well, we haven't had a real conversation about policy in a decade in this country.
Yeah. without a doubt. Mike, talk a little bit about your observations of the Michigan Senate race. Obviously, Mallory McMorrow, I've had her on the show. Haley Stevens has been on the show. Dr. Saeed has been on the show. Mallory decided to step out of the race, suspend her campaign, and the two remaining had a debate night before last. Big question, but I know you've got some thoughts and some observations about where we are with that race.
Yeah, well, first thing is I love Mallory McMorrow, and I think that she will 100% be back and be an important voice in the Democratic Party. And I think in this race, she just got kind of squeezed out in a way that I think that, and I've said this many a time, is like I think the establishment has rallied around Haley Stevens, and I think that they're making a mistake in that, as I do not think she's a particularly good general election candidate. She's an accomplished individual who I have respect for, but I just think she's not the kind of person we should be elevating in that. And they're creating a tremendous opening for Abdul El-Sayed and the left in Michigan to win this race. And if you watched the debate the other night, I personally thought Abdul was a much better candidate. You know, and I don't live in Michigan. Like, nobody in Michigan cares what I think, frankly, relative to this race. But I if I were voting, I think I would probably vote for Abdul. I just think he'd be closer to where I'm at. And I believe in Medicare for all, and I believe in economic populism. And, you know, I have some concerns about him and some of the things that he said in the past. But, you know, you have a choice and you make it. So, but Abdul has built a campaign that has so much energy and enthusiasm and momentum. They're raising a ton of money online. They're in the top 5 on ActBlue right now in small dollar contributors. They have volunteer operation. Like, I went to Michigan a couple weeks ago. I was in Grand Rapids for a wedding, and it happened to be the weekend of Pride in Grand Rapids. And I was impressed just seeing like 2 or 3 Abdul volunteers just running around in a relatively small Pride parade in Grand Rapids. Like, everybody had Abdul stickers. Like, there's just an organizing element that you see that I didn't see any presence for Haley Stevens. And I think that's an indication that she's not going to be able to win. And it's an old school mentality in the Democratic Party that they still have, is that, you know, we can nominate a candidate. She doesn't really resonate with people like in person. We're not going to build a volunteer operation. We're not going to do this work and create, you know, a real community here, but we can plow $100 million in TV ads and they'll get elected. That doesn't work anymore. Yeah. It doesn't. And like, AIPAC is, and you know, look, I all love and respect to my friends in the Jewish community, but AIPAC is the biggest spender right now in Democratic primaries. They spend $30 million here trying to, you know, elect, to tell Democrats who their nominees should be through these shell packs that they created. They came after Daniel Biss so hard. They came after Kat Abu-Ghazaleh in the same race too, millions of dollars. It was wrong. Yeah. They're doing the same thing here in Michigan. Like, I heard yesterday that they're planning to spend like $100 million to try to defeat Abdul. Like, that is, I don't care who you are. If you're getting $100 million from an outside lobbying group, you have promised them something. You're in debt to them. And I simply cannot, I can't support that.
Or you haven't said things that would piss them off enough to say that we aren't going to support you. That's the other side of it. Right. That's the complicit side. You know what I'm talking about. It's like, all right, if I don't say anything about this, then the people who are throwing me these crazy amounts of dollars are going to see that at least I'm not going to stand in the way of things that would be opposing to them. So that's the other side. And I think that's where Haley Stevens has gotten herself kind of caught right now, is that, you know, she hasn't come out and said anything that is directly, but or promised something, that made a public promise, but it's the things behind the curtain that I think that she's not talking about that are problematic for what you just. I
think it's also, so if I could just add, I just think it's also, it's what it represents to people in the Democratic Party right now. It's like, Israel is obviously like a very hot button issue, and a lot of people are angry about it, and they have every right to be, and I'm with them on that. I think it does represent to a lot of people, though, like where your values are and where your priorities are. And like, if you are one of these members of Congress, and Haley Stevens said this, like, I thought it was a joke for a while, but there's a real video of her talking at an AIPAC event where she's just like, I think about Israel in my dreams. Mm-hmm. I wake up in the morning and Israel's the first thing I think about, and be like, I need you to be thinking about Michigan. Mm-hmm. I need you to be thinking about voters. And it's not to say that Israel is not important. I want to protect the people of Israel. I would also like to protect the people of Palestine from the genocide and attacks that they're facing. It's just, you need to be focused on your people. And like, you know who understands that really well? Zohran Mamdani. Yep. The way that Mamdani talks about it, like, he's been able to sidestep that in a really meaningful way. So Ted Cruz does the same thing. He's like, you know, Ted Cruz told Tucker Carlson once, he was like, when I got to the United States Senate, my first priority was to protect Israel. And I was like, no, your first priority should be protect Texas. Okay. I just like, don't get these people.
Well, listen, here's a couple of observations. First of all, thank you for that breakdown, because it shows what I'm tired of people criticizing people who call out Israel's government, Bibi Netanyahu, and the Israeli military. Call them out. Just because we call them out for their actions doesn't mean that we have an issue with the Israeli people or Jews at large across the country, across the globe, rather. And let's be honest. This is where people get frustrated, Mike. I'm just telling you from an African-American male's perspective. People are like, well, okay, well, what about what's going on in parts of Africa? I mean, are we not concerned about that? We keep talking about what's going on in places in the Middle East, and I get that. But dang, how about the continent of Africa? Another conversation, different day. But that's part of the frustration that a lot of people aren't talking about as a frustration because we're so hyper-focused.
And that's totally right too. And the other thing I'll add to it as well is, like, if you want to just make it closer to Israel for a second, beyond Africa, which I think is very well said and correct. What about the treatment of, like, Christians in Lebanon? By Israel? Like, that's a legitimate conversation that needs to be happening too. And none of these people want to have that, even though they profess to be the best type of Christian, and they tell people like me, a practicing Catholic, that I'm not a real Christian. So come on.
I know. I listen, man. We're both preaching to each other's single man choir on this, but I'm saying that respectfully in agreement. But let me spin back to the race for a second as it relates to what we were saying about what Dr. Syed is doing. He's done an incredibly good job of groundwork. I mean, masterful. And I'll give you, to your point about Grand Rapids. I spent a lot of time in southwestern Michigan, and I've seen surprisingly, more signs for Dr. Syed than I thought I would, and not as many as I thought I would see for Stevens or for McMorrow, which tells me a lot about the groundwork. And then I'll layer onto this one other thing. The number of older white Michigan voters that are moving in the direction of Dr. Syed because of one primary issue. And what is it, Mike? It's healthcare. And he's talking about that from an experiential standpoint. And I dare say, as we wrap up real quickly, I think that one of the mistakes that Mallory made was to attack his efficacy in his medical background. I think that was a move she didn't need to make. And unfortunately, I think a lot of people remember that she did that. So I'm fingers crossed that we get the seat. That's ultimately my message is we have to. You said this earlier in the year. We have to win Texas. We have to win Maine. We have to win Michigan. And here we are. So and fingers crossed doesn't do a doggone thing, but we got to be fingers crossed right now.
I'll support whoever the nominee is.
Me too.
I mean, I don't get a vote, so let's just go to work.
Let's just go to work.
That's all. I want to beat these Republicans. They got to go.
They got to go. Mike, man, I'm glad you're well. I know you've been all over the map. Stay safe, brother. You know I care about you. I want to make sure you're staying good because we need your voice out here doing what we do.
Thanks, buddy. Back at you.
We'll talk to you again in a couple weeks, okay?
Talk to you later.
All right, bye now. All right, guys, let's hit this quick break. 773-763-9278 is the number. You're listening to Choose Views on WCPT AM 820 in Chicago and WARR 1520 AM and 103.5 FM from Warren County, North Carolina. AM 950, the progressive voice of Minnesota, is also where we hang out. I'm Richard Chu. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll be talking with one of the top authors out there today, Steve Phillips, columnist of the New York Times, best-selling author. We'll be right back. All right, guys, welcome back to Choose Views. If you're just tuning in, thanks for being with us. Thanks to Mike Nellis for his endless urgency commentary on what's happening in our politics throughout the country. And obviously, this Maine race is a major concern, as is Michigan and certainly Texas as it relates to the Senate and taking back not only the House, but taking back the U.S. Senate. My question of the day is, do you guys think that the Maine race is done for Democrats, or is there still a chance, and with who as the candidate? Mike mentioned some names, and I've got, my simplest comment is we have to win the seat. So at this point, we know what we're up against, and that's to make sure that we tag Susan Collins with all of her concerning deeds. And so there you go. Steve Phillips has been with us before. He's a columnist with the New York Times. He's a columnist and New York Times bestseller, I should say. And I'm glad to have him back with us. He's written some great books and titles that are provocative, but they also are substantive as it relates to the content of his work. Steve, good morning and welcome back to Choose Views.
Good morning. Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Absolutely. How has your world been these last few weeks? And I know that we just came off of the celebration of the country's birthday, if you will. But as you and I both know, prior to that, we celebrated Juneteenth, which is kind of a good juxtaposition against, celebrating 250 years when we have another holiday that said that, maybe some people still didn't quite experience the same freedoms that the majority of the other country had. Talk about that for a minute.
Yeah, well, we celebrated a document that does have the words "all are created equal," but it's also written by a grouping, of white men whose first law that was passed says that to be a U.S. citizen, you have to be a free white person. And that law, that 1790 law, was a good law up until the mid 20th century, and is responsible for why the U.S. has been such a white country. And that document also, the first drafts of it by Thomas Jefferson, included condemnation of the slave trade. And then the Southern slaveholders made him take that out. Yeah. So from the very beginning, this really existential question of what is this nation? Are we a multiracial democracy? Are we trying to be a multiracial democracy? Or is this fundamentally a white nation for free white persons? That debate began, really, frankly, 400 years ago and continues to this day. That's the essence of the fuel powering the current administration and all their attacks on everything that is not about straight white men. And those of us who are trying to actually honor and live up to the words of that document.
And that's the part there that, that's a great, almost professorial way of breaking down the faulting of the Constitution, or at least its application when it comes to look at Juneteenth and look at 250 and go, okay, we missed a lot. In just looking at those two celebrations, it's clear that a lot was missed. But I like the way you broke that down to say, this document had some things that were imperfect by design because it was to create a future society, if you will, almost sounding like, some of the movies from the 70s in terms of creating these future societies. But that's what it was designed to do. And here we are again. Steve, help us out with this, how the current administration, how the GOP at large is, and Project 2025 and its authors is using that, that gap in the Constitution, or maybe you might say the intention of the Constitution, to give them a foundation or standing to have the conversations we're having now about race and inclusion and birthright citizenship.
Yeah, one of the things that the media and frankly Democrats don't properly appreciate is how central to conservative and Republican and MAGA politics is white racial fear and resentment, and the power of that being the animating, motivating force around voter behavior and electoral behavior, bringing out large. One of the things people have not tracked, that each time Trump has run for president, more and more people have voted for him. And it's not that people have switched over, it's that more people keep coming out of the woodwork who didn't vote before. They got the bat signal that this is the chance to defend their notion of what this country should be. People forget that when Trump got into the race in 2015, he was at 4% in the polls. He was kind of a national joke.
Mm-hmm.
And then he says Mexicans are rapists and murderers, positions himself as going to defend this country against dark-skinned, Spanish-speaking Mexicans, zoomed to the top of the polls and has never turned back. So that's been his piece. But this comes on a long tradition that, most eloquently, is that the right word, articulated by George Wallace, the segregationist governor of Alabama, right? And so he says, I tried talking about roads and bridges and schools, and I couldn't get them to listen.
Mm-hmm.
Then I started talking about N-word, and they stomped the floor.
Yep.
And so Trump learned that lesson as well. When he went after Obama's birth certificate, and you start talking about race, fanning the flames of racial resentment and fear is a strong, powerful political force. And they can count. They can actually count better than the Democrats and progressives can. They see this country was 12% people of color in the 1960s. It's 42% people of color now. And then a third of whites are with us. And so they're trying to reduce the numbers of people of color, certainly in who vote, but ideally even who are even here. This is a lot of the animus and the basis of the immigration and of ICE, of rounding people up, getting them out of here, attacks on voting rights and the Voting Rights Act, and the really trying to, that was the point around trying to attack the 14th Amendment, was to eliminate a whole grouping of people who allegedly, or not allegedly, by their view, should not be here, except when we're trying to win the World Cup. And the best black player is from Nigeria as a birthright citizen. So,
and a lot of people don't understand that what took place. I mean, literally, his mother was 7 months pregnant. Is that right? And she was about to board a plane. And the powers that be said, no, this is not the right way to go. It's not safe, etc. And he ended up being born in the United States. The irony, Steve, help me out if irony is the right word, but the irony of that situation is just like, wow. It's almost like when Steve Scalise got shot. The surgeon that essentially saved him, or was at the head of the line in saving him, was an LGBTQ black woman, and these are hyper moments, but it just goes to show, and I'm by design merging this with your book, are white men smarter than everybody else? So here we have in two situations where a black person, a person of color, an African descendant, if you will, is the one that was saving the day in an area that this country says that's important to them.
100%. Yeah, I mean, hypocrisy is probably the right word. So when they need us, they want us, right? But the other times they're, and it shows the hypocrisy too. It's not that they don't really actually want us or they don't actually need us, but they know that the boogeyman of the dangerous people of color or the other or LGBTQ people inflames their base. And so they're doing that as a marketing tool without really grappling with what it means in the real world.
Yeah, because it again, it's playing to the audience that has been quiet. I love what you said about George Wallace. Absolutely. I mean, I was old enough to remember those races and the racism that surrounded his ascent. Was all about hyperbolic politics. It was all he finally figured it out. You said that they can count. He finally figured out these messages, which are really about helping the people. This is the crazy thing. It was about things that mattered to people's everyday lives, but they don't seem to give a damn about them. So let's talk about the dark people in the room and make them the boogie persons. And if we can get the folks out to vote against them, then we'll win. And that's the history of white men in politics at large, not in every corner in this country. That's been the ultimate thing to turn back to, is let's make it about the others. If we can do that successfully enough and get just enough people who want to think in their mind that they don't have all the largesse and the success and the privilege, it's because it's brown. But in fact, no, it's not. It's someone that looks just like the person in the mirror. But it's hard for people to
right. And that also can I add, because you were mentioning we just got started right about Maine, and that's another example of where too many people in Democratic Party leadership, frankly, can't count very well, and so they are obsessed with this notion about trying to get a white man who can appeal to their image of they prize white male votes more than any other votes. It's just get this white guy who's supposedly rugged and an oyster man, and he can help us win back these voters, even if he is, as alleged, a rapist. And the math of just setting the morality aside, women are a majority of the population. And so this notion that we should be trying to find and overlook all of these flaws in order to get our ideal white man, hopefully who will draw white male voters to us, it's immoral, but it's also bad politics and bad math. And that's what was playing itself out in Maine.
Yeah, and for me, and we're going to take a quick break, but for me, the thing that was, it's personal and directly personal that stood out and was the comment about black folks and tipping. I thought y'all need to pay attention to who this person is. And I know we're going to talk about Plattner, and many people want to just brush it off and be done with it. But to me, the reason that talking about Plattner is important is it shows the systemic problem when it comes to what we view or who we view should be our leaders. Is that we can skip by a whole bunch of stuff, but some of the most basic things should be alarming to say, okay, maybe that's the person that necessarily shouldn't be chosen. So, Steve, let's take a quick break. When we come back, I want to talk a little bit more about. I want to talk about the book, most recent, and the others that you've written, and get into some of the bias that's in the country that we skip past sometimes. The number is 773-763-9278. You're listening to Choose Views on WCPT, AM 820 in Chicago, and WARR 1520 AM and 103.5 FM from Warren County, North Carolina, as well as AM 950, the progressive voice of Minnesota. I'm talking with author, columnist, Steve Phillips. We'll be right back. All right, guys, welcome back to Choose Views. If you're just tuning in, I'm Richard Chu. We're talking with Steve Phillips, columnist and New York Times bestselling author. His latest book, Are White Men Smarter Than Everybody Else? And talk a little bit about your concept of swamp and what that means. And then I want to share with you what one of our listeners just sent us. Go for it, Steve.
Well, I started on the book in the context of asking what happened to the commitments around racial justice after George Floyd was killed. You had this kind of brief period of racial reckoning, lots of commitments, Walmart saying in an ad, Black Lives Matter, and people making these different commitments, including Walmart, $100 million for a racial justice center, et cetera. And then obviously everybody has backtracked, which is important to note, predated this current Oval Office occupant coming into office. And so you had that reality. And so that was the original inquiry. And then you had the ferocity of these attacks from this current administration. And you had the underlying inequality, which everybody had said that they cared about 6 years ago. Now you have all these attacks on any remedy to the inequality. And so what are we saying about what that inequality? And are we okay with that? And then do we think that white men are overrepresented because they're smarter? So this was the basic premise. In this process, it became clearer to me that I do feel we've reached the limit of the approach that we had been taking, which was to focus on the underrepresentation of people of color and of women. Underrepresented minorities is the whole phrase. And that inexorably leads to an analysis that is a deficit analysis. What's wrong with people of color? What's wrong with women? What are they lacking? They don't have enough education. They don't have enough mentors. They don't have this. They don't have that. It's a different inquiry. If you look at the other side of that same coin, the underrepresentation of people of color and women is the overrepresentation of white men. Mm-hmm. And what's that about? And that's a very different inquiry and leads to a very different public policy agenda, actually, and a very different set of practices. And there's far more empirical evidence looking at Jennifer Eberhard, MacArthur Genius, Stanford professor, is at a whole book called Bias, exploring the implicit unconscious bias that everybody has. It's how the brain actually functions. And then Isabel Wilkerson in Caste lays this out as well. It says that we're all on a stage that was built long before we got here. We know who's supposed to play what roles. So we have these implicit biases. That's what I am trying to articulate and distill into this phrase, straight white American male preference, which the acronym for that is SWAMP, in that we have this widespread preference for white men going on, which is why they are actually in all these positions. So I'm trying to encourage that level of conversation and focus in our discourse.
Yeah, and it's hard. I mean, you and I know this as men, as African-American men more specifically. It's hard to have that conversation. I'll share a story with you. I was talking with someone that was referencing a comment that someone that had made in their family. This is a white family that I'm speaking of. Made a reference to a comment that the person made about the significance of Juneteenth. And in my receiving of that information, I responded back with some suggestions about how to navigate that territory and not, disrupt the family dynamic. And in listening to some of the conversation, the justification of, but all the other great things that this person is doing in terms of, his business and, make contributions to this and that and the other. And I said, but what you still have to focus on is all that good is not going to fix this opinion that he perceives himself, and this is that overrepresentation, as being better because he thinks that Juneteenth is silly. So this is a moment where that white male privilege is rampant and behavior gets excused because of all the good that is perceived that he does. Meanwhile, he has this perception that he's better than other people, and that celebration is silly. And so I see this as one of those moments where people have got to slow down sometimes and say, do we have this inherent bias in terms of white male preference? And it's clear that we do, because the behavior gets justified. The bad behavior gets justified. Plattner's situation is a good example of it. And unfortunately, the list goes on of those types of that type of behavior that we just kind of look past and excuse.
Yeah, no, 100%. And so it's in the level of the overrepresentation. So that's why I'm also calling for swamp audits, and really to look at white men are 29% of the population. And so they're, 86% of the corporate CEOs. They've been 98% of the presidents of the country. They're, overrepresented among professors and newspaper editors and all these different levels. Why is that? And either they are smarter, and then we just have to say, okay, they are, or we have to come to terms with this issue of preference. I'm actually going to be working on, at the end of the month, and be releasing a swamp audit of the Democratic Party. And that really looking at the level of straight white American male preference that permeates both the party's leadership and its thinking around which voters are most important. Every single leader of the top Democratic Party organizations is white. 71% of that leadership grouping are white men. And then even more problematic is which voters they go after, which is part of what we saw with the Plattner piece. White men are not the majority of the electorate. And yet the vast majority of the spending, the thinking, the strategies, the energy is targeted at white men. And so there's a preference there that is actually politically dangerous and undermines the actual potential to win elections and take back this country.
And it's not, and this is where this is by design, a criticism in a good way of how the Democratic Party has to look at itself. And I got a text from someone, and I'm going to try to read this as best possible. This is from one of our listeners in Oak Park, Cassandra. She says, "Oh my God, this is great. This guest is great. Kudos to you, Steve, and should give a talk to the DNC to help them recalibrate their messaging." He says the real deal out loud, and that's so precise right now. What you just said about the numbers wasn't just at Republicans; it's at how Democrats perceive themselves when it comes to who we should be pursuing for voting across the board. Talk a little bit more about that. And yeah, I agree with Cassandra that we should, what you just said should be in front of the DNCs, which ironically, once again, picked a white dude to head the, anyhow, go for it. Sorry, Steve.
Right, so all the committees, the DNC, the Senate, Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee, the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, and their affiliated super PACs, all run by white people, most of them run by white men, which is problematic on multiple levels, but most simply because they don't then understand the realities, the concerns, the motivations of the majority of the electorate, actually. And you see this in terms of the reluctance, you saw it in the Plattner piece, you see it in the reluctance to champion and to really be aggressive as a party on the whole Epstein file situation, that the Republicans and have been protecting pedophiles. And so are the Democrats going to go after that? But there's been a reluctance to do that because they're worried that men will feel like, well, does that mean about, any of my behavior? It's most problematic. I would say two examples of what the Democrat Party is falling short in running a risk. So one is actually up in Alaska, And so the Democratic nominee up in Alaska, Mary Portola, is Native Alaskan.
Yep.
And people don't realize that Alaska has the largest Native population of any state within the country by percentage. It's 15%. And you've got a significant Latino population, and you've got, Asians and Latino and African Americans. But there's been very little investment from the National Party in trying to maximize and communicate to that Native population that we have a Native candidate, because their mindset doesn't calculate that. Those are not the voters that they think are most important.
Yeah.
And then the most egregious example is the situation with David Valdeo in California, in that in 2018, I was involved with trying to get people involved to support a community-based group that came out of the United Farm Workers Movement to back opposition to Valdeo. This is a 2/3 Latino district. And what we heard was that the Democratic Super PAC was like, well, there's a lot of Latinos in that district and they don't vote, so we should not do that district. But we pushed them and we moved money to the community-based group, Communities for New California. They called 30,000 people, knocked on the doors, turned out Latino vote. We won that seat by 800 votes. But this year, the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee opposed the Latino candidate in the primary. And so it's like, what is their conception of who the voters are that are going to lead us to victory? And that is infected by and limited by this whole swamp mindset within the Democratic Party.
Yeah, this white male preference leads us down a path of bad decisions and of ultimately bad outcomes. Steve Phillips, I love listening to what our listeners said is spot on. Your messaging and your thoughtfulness and of course your experience is so important right now. Thank you for taking some time out of your busy schedule to hang out with us this morning. Look forward to having you back again. I know we got more to talk about, but thanks for spending some time today, Steve.
Thanks, I appreciate it.
All right,
Good seeing you.
We'll talk soon. All right, bye-bye. Okay. Guys, let's take a quick break. 773-763-9278 is the number. You're listening to Choose Views on WCPT, AM 820 in Chicago, and WARR 1520 AM and 103.5 FM, way down in Warren County, North Carolina, and back up again to our folks at AM 950, the progressive voice of Minnesota. We'll be right back. All right, guys, welcome back to Choose Views. If you're just tuning in, I'm Richard Chu. Thanks to Steve Phillips. Wow, what a what a thoughtful guy. All the things that I could label him as. So check him out, and you can go to his website. He's got just some great writing, bestseller, New York Times bestseller, and wonderful columnist and strategist as well. Obviously, you can hear by the work that he's done with various elections, and also to Mike Nellis, another great strategist and thinker, host of Endless Urgency, and someone that I use this phrase often, but it's appropriate, sleeves rolled up and digging in to help people. I said at the top of the show, this is a person that's actually helping people's lives. Kate Lincoln-Goldfinch, one of the top, if not top, maybe my favorite, so I'm going to say she's top immigration attorneys in the country. Kate, welcome back to Choose Views. Glad to be with you this morning.
Hey, good morning. How you doing? Sorry I'm late.
You're not late. You're here. No, you're fine. You're fine. I'm good. I'm good. I'm excited about our conversation. I know we don't have all the time in the world. We can have you on for hours to talk about all that's happening right now. But I'm glad you're back, and I know you've been super busy the last few weeks since we had you on. Give us an update. Give us a state of the union in terms of what you've been working on. I know we've got a couple things I want to ask you, but give us an update of what's happening.
I would say it's worse than ever before in terms of people being taken. The detentions are up, and the way that people are getting detained mostly is through traffic stops. And it's thousands a day, and they're taken from their families and they're being put into detention centers. 2 days ago, I think it was, another person was killed by ICE. His name was Lorenzo Salgado Araujo. He's a man from Mexico who's been in this country for 35 years, 3 U.S. citizen sons, driving his construction crew, and ICE shot and killed him and then claimed that he was weaponizing his vehicle, which there is no evidence of. So that is the big, sad, heartbreaking news of the moment, that these ICE agents just continue to be untrained and unchecked, and people are dying on the streets and in detention. And when something like the Lorenzo killing happens, people do pay attention. So there are eyes on the situation right now, but it does start to feel in the interim like these invisible takings of people aren't as known publicly, and that I don't know if your audience feels this way, that the immigration conversation quiets down a little bit when people aren't, being murdered on the streets, or there aren't raids and things like that. But more and more people are being taken. And that's the part I think that's been really hard to witness, is that it's happening and there isn't the same public outrage in the in-between moments.
Well, you said something the last time you were on that I think was, I know you're the first person that I heard say it, which is even the fact that we're not seeing it on television or we're not seeing it on our phones doesn't mean that it's not happening. And you said, which I've been trying to repeat as much as possible, and in many ways it's actually more things that are happening. We're just not seeing them like we were. With, obviously the two cases up in Minneapolis, Minnesota, the one here in Chicago and all that. And, I'm not a conspiracy person, but I just look at things and go, there's a plan here. And what's my point? Corporate media isn't covering things as much as they were. And I think that that's by design. When we look at this is so Kate, when I've said that the consolidation of media isn't just about, what shows you're going to watch in terms of your streaming and all that. It's about the coverage of news. It's about coverage of issues. And I dare say that when you look at a CBS and Barry Weiss and all that's happening, we have enough evidence. Scott Pelley, spilled the tea when he said that she's been trying hard to get them to say things a certain way and not cover certain stories a certain way. To me, this is where the consolidation is an issue. Because now corporate media, I feel like they've basically retreated from covering the things that are happening on the ground when it comes to people being grabbed and these shootings. I mean, tell me your thoughts there.
I think that that's certainly true, that corporate media is taking over and is not covering these things. And I think that what happens in these sort of vacuums of real information is that people get into their echo chambers on social media and they believe the lies that they tell each other. And I remember I was on a conservative, God, what's his name? Leland something or other. He's a conservative talk radio guy. And I was telling him that I personally had heard of 3 stories of children left behind when their parents were taken by the police. And I had just a few days before that gotten off the phone with a 16-year-old boy who was in his dad's work truck. He and his brother, who was just over 18, and himself, and his dad got pulled over, and they left his dad's work truck and this boy on the side of the road who doesn't have a driver's license, and they took his dad and his brother. And this kid was the 3rd kid that I personally had heard of or spoken to being left behind by law enforcement. And so I was telling this conservative talk show host about my experience and about how these enforcement actions are, harming children, and surely we're not with this. And he just immediately said, well, I need evidence of that. Like, you're not telling the truth. As if I was inventing it, which was the exact same response I got on social media when I posted about the same thing. People either celebrate the murder of Lorenzo, which they did on my social media post about that, which I don't even know what to say about that, or they're confronted with something real and unacceptable, like leaving children behind, and then the immediate response that they have is, it's a lie. You're a liar. You're just some lady on the radio. You're just some lady posted on social media. I don't have to believe you because you're a liar. So there's no, place of truth for the truth anymore. And what's happening in that vacuum is really scary. And I know we all see it online. And my lens on this is my social media, because I post about this stuff every day, and somehow it gets to the wrong side. They say the wrong side of Facebook, the wrong side of TikTok. And I see, and they're not bots. I mean, I check these profiles. These are literal humans. And the way that they respond to these things and think about these things is really scary. And it's really clear that they have no truth in their life about what's happening.
There's no quote unquote North Star, if you will, of truth and that's, it seems like everybody's saying, I think everybody's saying a version of that there's no sort of central bank, if you will, that we can go, yeah, we know that that's the truth, or we know that that's not true, or parts of it are need to be challenged. That's not really, in my mind, an area that we can depend on. And the consolidation of media, corporate media specifically, is amplifying that reality that there isn't a real place to go, because it doesn't seem as though. And then I have to be specific and say CBS is at the front of the line of not allowing its journalists to speak the truth based on the facts that they've researched. I mean, the Scott Pelley situation was, if there wasn't Don Lemon gets fired. We've got other folks that have had things happen, gets arrested, and there's other things that, like I said, but the thing with Scott Pelley to me was really, if we needed an eye opener about how the media is been compromised, and CBS specifically, and its connection to Paramount and the Ellison family and the White House, that truth doesn't really seem to matter right now. And I'm repeating myself, but I feel like much of corporate media has sort of backed away from telling the stories that you just talked about in a way that keeps people on point and angry and frustrated and in the street, because they know that that's not to the benefit of the Republican Party right now. Let's just calling it as it is. So thank you for reminding us of that. I think the person you were talking about was Leland Vittman or something like that. Was it on News Nation? Was that who you were on? The conservative.
Leland was his name. Let me see if I can find.
I think it's Leland Vitter. That seems to come to mind for me, but I could be wrong.
He's in Louisville. WHAS Radio was his name.
Okay.
I kind of went off on him.
Well, yeah, because that's where I'm going. I'm not going to let you get away from that, because I check out the stuff that you post, and I'm here to tell you guys need to go and check out Kate's post, because she rarely gets she rarely goes down that path where she publicly will dress somebody down. But this was one of those moments where she did. And she got to get some salty language involved in the process, too, which I thought was spot on, Kate. So kudos to you for defending not only yourself, but defending what you believe and what you posted. So I do say thank you for that, because sometimes you just got to let people know you're not going to cross that line with me. And with the work that you do, it's about the work that you do. And when that's challenged and people say, oh, no, that's not happening, you're on the ground. You see it literally every day, Monday through Sunday. So I just got to give you your flowers there. Kate, let's take a quick break. When we come back, I got to get your thoughts on birthright citizenship and what's happening there. I want to talk a little bit about how you're navigating some of your work with businesses and how they're being impacted by what's happening with immigration. 773-763-9278 is a number. You're listening to Choose Views on WCPT AM 820 in Chicago and WARR 1520 AM and 103.5 FM from Warren County, North Carolina, and AM 950, the progressive voice of Minnesota. I'm talking with immigration attorney Kate Lincoln-Goldfinch. We'll be right back. guys, welcome back to Chew's Views. If you're just tuning in, I'm Richard Chew. We're talking with Kate Lincoln-Goldfinch, who is one of those leading voices and an immigration attorney for all of our country, but she's based in Austin, Texas. Kate, obviously the 6-3 decision with regard to birthright citizenship was a huge relief, a deep breath for all of us. You know, I thought it should have been 9-0 because it's in the Constitution. It's not a debatable item. It should have been 9-0 because the Constitution's very clear. It's literally very clear. And I know some people wanted to try to spin the what's the one phrase? Gosh darn it. Subject
to the jurisdiction thereof.
Whoa, damn. I love that. How did you know? So how did you know that's what I was struggling with? Yes, go. Talk to us, Kate. Talk to us about this decision.
Well, I mean, it should have been a 9-0. It shouldn't have never been at the court in the first place. You know, the Supreme Court is the one court that can grant cert to hear cases or not. You know, so they could have just said, this whole thing is preposterous. We're not even going to give it our airtime, but they heard arguments on the case. And not at that moment, you know, once the executive order came down, which of course was Trump's attempt on the first day in office to end birthright citizenship. And once the executive order came down, I thought, that's, you know, just a lot of noise. We're not going to need to worry about that. And then they granted cert, heard oral arguments. The oral arguments seemed to go pretty well. And then I was still feeling rather confident. And then the Supreme Court toward the end of the term was giving a bunch of decisions siding with Trump leading up to it. And it was a nail biter. You know, it was the last day of the term. We knew the birthright citizenship case or decision was going to be dropping that morning. And it came down and it was, you know, 5-4 or 6-3, depending upon how you count Kavanaugh's concurrence in the middle. And of course, the court ultimately decided properly that the president can't change the Constitution by executive order. But the fact that we had to worry about it, had a Supreme Court case, had a decision that was not a slam dunk, shows you just how bad it is. But ultimately, on the question of birthright citizenship, I think we really can exhale at this point because there's no way Congress is going to try and pass some statute, you know, about it. I can't even envision that.
Yeah, and I'm going to merge a couple things here. We've been following, like all of us, the conversation around what's happening up in Maine with Graham Plattner, and I've been saying, listen, we need to tag Susan Collins. She's the real culprit. She's the real villain here. Plattner's issues are Plattner's issues, but for 3 decades, Susan Collins has stabbed everybody in the back, not just in Maine, but the country at large because of her voting. We talk about Brett Kavanaugh in this conversation and his sort of milquetoast commentary after this decision. And I look at that and I go, for the people who want to get behind where he is, what are you looking at? This is the same guy that was rightfully, by many standards, accused of, raping Dr. Ford. Yet he's now saying that Congress should have or should try to use their purview to create a situation where, and it's just, that's why people, I believe, have to pay even closer attention because this is where we end up. And it's my moment where I get to say Hillary Clinton was right. She laundry listed some things that were going to happen. And boy, have they played out, unfortunately, to our disadvantage. But I wanted to get your take on that as it relates to the standing in the first place and why it should even have crossed the doors of the Supreme Court and been up for oral arguments, because most legal experts have said that was the mistake. That was the first mistake. To even let it be there, but the makeup of the Supreme Court is probably the main reason for that. With business owners and across the board, but I know that your primary focus is in Texas. But what are you seeing now? What are you hearing from businesses, and what are some of the things that they're doing to try to create a better place, a better workforce? or workforce opportunities for people that are caught up or potentially going to be caught up in what's happening with immigration in Texas and the greater parts of the country?
Well, I think what's happening now, what's new and different now is we're looking at interior enforcement. Trump 1.0 was border enforcement. We've never seen what we have now, which is people who are fully entrenched, have long lives in the United States, working, families, businesses, economies that they support. So for the first time, we really are seeing all of these businesses impacted, and it's every sector. It's healthcare, elder care, hospitality, construction, tech, innovation. Every industry is impacted. And on the ground, what I see is a lot more business owners reaching out to me about their employees who have been picked up, because that's the work that I do. I do detention, removal. I work with the immigrant families. I don't do investor visas and H-1B visas. I mean, the business immigration attorneys are working with the corporations, and it's as much of a nightmare for them as it is for people like me. But what I'm seeing is the small business owners who heavily rely on these people and care deeply about them. That kid I told you about, the 16-year-old who was left on the side of the road, the employer of his dad that same day called me crying. It's a fencing company.
The employer did.
And he said, the employer was crying. And he's like, we just did a whole fence on the elementary school around the corner together. This man matters to me. And that's what I'm seeing is the employers who deeply care about and love and also depend upon these employees and they're doing things like, can I pay for this service? What can I do? But it's just as much as these families are being impacted, small businesses and industries are being impacted, of course.
Are you, I guess this is, how do I want to phrase this question? Are there preemptive things that businesses are doing or that you're helping them do and or be prepared for in the event that someone that is a part of their employment gets snatched or gets detained even for the day? What are you sort of trying to do to help in that space?
Yeah, we've done, so we do a lot of resource dissemination. So we have a workplace safety packet. It's all available. I don't know if you want me to give the website, but it's free for download. It's Abogada Kate. Abogada means attorney in Spanish.com. And there's a resources page that has the WorkSafe packet, which has the sign you can post on the private areas of a business, because a private area of a business is just like a house. It's protected in the same way constitutionally. So we've done that for businesses. We're doing the safety planning packets, of course, for the immigrants themselves, which protects children and liberty, but also we're rolling out an asset and pet protection part of the packet, so that because there's this this idea, people often ask me, like, how do you get paid for what you do, with this idea that immigrants are indigent or they don't have money, when in fact immigrants are very resourceful, responsible. They often have more savings. And, I know this, I ran a bankruptcy practice for a long time. I had no immigrant clients in my bankruptcy practice, but immigrants are as concerned about the house that they bought, the car that they own, the business that they run, as they are with what happens if I get picked up. So we're also talking to people about durable power of attorney and how do you get access to your bank account if you get detained. So that's kind of the pre-work that we're doing right now.
That's... we all laughed in the studio when you said that, and laughing in favor of, and once again, that embracing laugh of our brothers and sisters who are immigrants from the southern border, as much as immigrants from our other three that we have. People forget about that sometimes, Kate. I know you don't, but we got three other borders, and folks are coming from different parts of the planet to the United States. And that leads me to this last little question I'm going to ask you. It's a quick one, and then we'll let you go. But are you seeing numbers of are you seeing our immigrant numbers decline from countries from European countries. Is there anything out there that you've seen that's showing a reduction because folks are saying, you know what, right now I don't want to test the waters in the United States?
Yes, for sure. That is definitely happening. And I don't have the latest statistics on that. I just know sort of like through fuzzy memory what I've seen over the years, but over the year. But, the student visas are declining. People are choosing not to come here and study because they don't want to come here. They're afraid that they're going to lose their visas. The employment visas have been impacted, the $100,000 fee for H-1B visas that then got struck down. So professional workers who would come here are not coming. People are preferring to go to Canada. And visitors are also choosing not to come here because Europeans have been detained and treated very badly. So all levels of immigrant, from the high level tech investor worker, to the visitor, are electing like, you know what, I think I'm just not going to bother with that right now. And so I don't have the stats on that, but that's definitely happening, and it's impacting us from an economic tourism perspective and also from a labor force perspective.
Yeah,
for sure.
Kate Lincoln-Goldfinch, we need 3 hours to talk about all that's going on, but we thank you so much. I say this to you all the time, and I mean it. We appreciate your hard work. We know how hard it is from what you've told us to do what you're doing, but thanks as always for being with us this morning. And just stay safe, okay? We look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thanks. I always love talking to you too. So
all right.
See you soon.
See you soon. All right, Kate. Talk to you soon.
Okay.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Guys, thanks to Kate, of course. Thanks to Mike Nellis, and thanks to Steve Phillips for riding with us this morning. I got to give my shout out to my man, Matty B, who's filling in for Henry because they're shifting things around. The chess pieces are moving all over the place. And Mike Mercado is the mad scientist that's helping this show sound and look good. So I got to give my praises to my guys, our team, every single day. Kate will tell you we don't do this on our own. I will tell you we don't do this on our own. We all know that. So I'll leave you guys with this today. Find the people you're going to shoulder up with, because that makes the difference. Be connected to the people that are going to help you accomplish the things that you're working on. Maddie B and I were talking about this earlier. And let's stay focused on the prize, or the prizes that we have in front of us. Taking back our democracy is a big part of it, but being connected and working together with each other is another part that I actually think comes before it, and it strengthens our ability to take back our democracy, is to come together. So everybody have a good rest of the day. Stay tuned for the Stephanie Miller Show, and take that deep breath. Make your life count. We'll see you tomorrow.